I'm very pleased to introduce you to Chris Hacker, who is the Vice President of Marketing and the Design and Creative Director of Herman Miller. In his role, Chris connects the marketing initiatives of the entire workplace portfolio for Herman Miller and oversees the integration on the creative efforts across the products, communication, and experiences. Now, prior to joining Herman Miller, Chris was the Chief Design Officer at Johnson & Johnson, so really bringing a completely different industry into the work that he's leading. And he led the creative teams of brand identity, product and packaging design, and retail and facility design and branding imagery. So today I introduce you to Chris Hacker.
As Kate said, I am an industrial designer by training. And I've spent most of my career in big corporations managing design process. And when about a year ago I had the chance to join Herman Miller, it was because I've always been passionate about space and the way people work. And in fact, in the last 3 corporations that I worked in, I managed to change their paradigms about what the office and the workplace would be. At J&J, I joined the company and built the design studio, which is here in New York City. And I asked I'll apologize in advance to all of you facilities people. I asked the facilities folks at J&J to kind of stay out of the project, because what I was interested in doing was not replicating what was there, but going somewhere new. And so when the opportunity came to go to work at Herman Miller, I was really excited about the opportunity to help a company that I believe strongly in to help companies of the future come about. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is the living office. And this is a program that we've been working on the last few years. We have a significant number of researchers and folks helping us develop the ideas around this. But it's because business is changing. You heard from the folks this morning about the way big conservative organizations are thinking about things differently. And it's really important for companies to pay attention to that because there is a real change in the way the workplace is being organized. The life cycle of businesses is rapidly changing. Now, in order to understand that, we have to look at a little history. So I'm going to give you a very quick history of the way the workplace has worked in the last 100 years. And so the first of these is really the era of industry. It's when major companies were starting to make big products and producing them in mass. And they had an office and a workplace that was built around the same ideas as mass production. There were lots of rows of desks. It was a very hierarchical management style. And the logic of the place was, I'm the boss, you go do what I tell you to do, right? So the era of industry got us up and running as a society to be making the kind of progress we needed to make, but it was being done in a very different place. The offices were just huge open rooms with thousands of desks being used by people every day. And they worked and they worked and they had typewriters, and that's about it. It was a very paper-heavy organizational process, and it meant that there had to be room for all that paper. There were huge numbers of file cabinets. It was a very kind of chaotic place, but chaotic only in that it got organized by the kind of mechanized way people worked. Does that make sense? So following that came the era of information, and we had a much more matrixed kind of organization. What happened later in the 20th century was that information processing, remember those big giant IBM computers that were in cold rooms with people punch typing cards, the information flow allowed corporations to become global. And that global nature allowed the workplace to change a little bit, but it was all driven by the information process of it. And that really was a very different kind of organization. It was many people in very efficient office spaces using, Herman Miller's Action Office at the beginning and others as they went on, and evolved into the kind of cubicle logic that none of us love today. The beginning of that was that there were creative people who started to think differently, and that led to the era of ideas, which is where we are today. Management is decentralized and even more matrixed than it was before. We are working from a place of creativity and new ideas. It's less about mass production, although of course those things still happen. The tools are now this kind of ubiquitous thing we all have in our pockets, which is more powerful than any computer I had up until about 10 years ago, right? So all of the computers from the information era are packed into these things, and every one of you have one, right? Anybody not have one of these in their pocket? See? Everybody. And that allows us really to work from anywhere. There's a change in the way people are thinking and working that is more about the thinking and less about being together with other people. There's a larger logic of how that works. We are going from this kind of work that was a lot of people in one place doing a lot of things in a kind of assembly line fashion to more this kind of work, which is a collaborative, engaged idea generation workplace. And the idea that most of those people aren't really sitting around looking at computers, they're working on models, they're developing ideas together, is the kind of power of this. The other thing that's happening, I happened on this a couple of months ago in San Francisco. This is a retail store cafe that is called the Workshop Cafe, and basically it is a place that formalizes the idea of Starbucks and your computer into a place where you actually go in and you can connect through high-speed internet to your office, and you are, you are able to take a couple of spaces, kind of reserve them. So it's like reserving a table for lunch, except you're reserving a table for mid-morning coffee break with your 4 associates who are working on a project with you. My indication that this is successful are these guys over here outside, not paying for the space, but using the internet and still doing work. The place was overwhelmed. So the workplace today is everywhere, basically. And the idea is that there should be a logic of how people work and what they think about that's based on the fundamentals of life and not on industry. So we have gotten away from this idea that industry drives what we do. And what we need to think about is that life and humanity drive what we do. So, we're moving from these kinds of tools, which are, still, of course, ubiquitous in the workplace, but we're also getting these kinds of tools. And for those of you who aren't Big Bang Theory fans, that is a 3D printer that allows you to make virtually anything you want in your office. When I was Chief Design Officer at Johnson & Johnson, we had, as part of our design studio, 3 of those machines. And it allowed our industrial designers to make a model in 3 hours that actually looked like a real thing. And it allowed a kind of speed of collaboration and design logic that made a huge amount of difference in our speed to market. We could get a product to market in about 1/3 the time that we had formerly been able to do it, because we were doing it collaboratively and quickly. Now, technology and I heard some discussion earlier about how technology is kind of a driver of this process. And as I said earlier, that's what's driving being able to be in different kinds of workplaces and workspaces. The technology has to be like air. You know, we all just breathe. We don't think about having to breathe and have the air go in, you know, take a breath in, take a breath out. The air just exists and our bodies keep going kind of automatically. Technology needs to be the same way. Technology has to work so that somebody walking into the office can open their laptop or pull up their phone and have all of the information they have and want at their fingertips without having to think about it. It's just like breathing. Now, are we there yet? Not quite, but we're getting better, and I think that's going to be a key to the workplace of the future as we go forward. You know, if you think back to 2006, there were 100 million smartphone users worldwide. And when the survey that we based this on was done in 2012, there were 1 billion smartphone users worldwide. There are now 1.5 billion smartphone users 2 years later. And oh, by the way, you know, 12 million Facebook users in 2006 to 1 billion in 2012. That's now doubled, and they're about 2 billion in Facebook users. 700,000 apps has gone to 1.2 billion apps in that 2 years. Whew. Speed is happening in terms of how technology works. Now, this is the kind of place we need to get away from. Nobody wants to work there. Nobody is happy there. It is not conducive to the kind of thinking that we're thinking about in that process. This is the kind of workplace of the future, which is built around how people think and work. This is what's called the design yard in Holland, Michigan for Herman Miller. This is our main headquarters. And this is called the front door, and it's the kind of plaza space where everybody meets and greets. Many people come out, and you'll notice there are people sitting at the counter with their computers open and working. There are also people having chats. I find when I go to Michigan, I actually live in Los Angeles, but I go to Michigan sort of every other week. I spend a lot of time hanging out there because I meet almost everybody I need to talk to. So it's less about formal meetings, it's more about this kind of interactivity that happens in a way that is naturally human, which is what we're wanting it to be. We really need the enterprises of the future to be based on fundamentals of life, you know, not on this industry, as I said before. And we also need to attract, nurture, make happy, enjoy their jobs, all of the people who come to work in our places. We only get good work out of people if they're happy. And so making people happy is a really important part of the world. The engine of prosperity is something that we have used to kind of describe how this will help make companies successful. Because after all, the bottom line is ultimately what makes companies work, and it is what allows people to do the kinds of things they want to do. So the idea of the prosperity wheel is that there are individual people who are contributing on an individual basis, and they are balanced by the entire workforce who are helping them kind of connect and make work better. That is balanced by the passion that those people put into their work and the money and economic drivers that are part of a company. So if you have just the economic driver and just the group of people, you end up with a kind of mean, not so nice place to work. But if you include the passion and the heart of people's idea of themselves and the work they do, the balance becomes prosperity. Make sense to everybody? So one of the provocations we talk about as we have developed this program is that the next big thing is not for you. And what we're trying to say by this is that your organization is different than every other organization, and that just because we make some fabulous widget-driven piece of furniture, that's not what it's about. What it's about is planning for people and making sure that they understand what the living office and what their office is about. So as part of that, we've developed a group of modes of work that are, there are 10 of these. 7 of them are driven by combo work, people working together. And by the way, at your table, just to make this, I'm going to make this a little quicker. At your table are some of these brochures in the center. This explains these modes of work and settings logic more clearly than I can. And if you don't have enough, there's some more outside, so help yourself to those. But these are the way people work. They work, for instance, warm up, cool down is one of my favorites. If you think about going to a meeting, you want to get the participants who are presenting at a meeting together ahead of time to agree on who's going to say what and what they're going to present, and who's going to do what. They have the meeting, and then afterwards, you need to get back together to say, well, Susie didn't really believe in our premise. We have to figure out how to go forward and do something else. And there's this opportunity for warm up and cool down. Most offices don't have a place to do that. So what we've developed is a series of ideas that make settings that allow warm up and cool down to happen. The settings are also explained in the book, but these are about the way you organize furniture to make places that allow the modes of work to happen. There are several modes of work that happen in many of these settings, so it's kind of a mix and match process, and I don't have time to explain the whole thing, but what I can explain is the difference between an organization that's very hierarchical, that's the one on that side, which has the greens are private offices, just so you know. So the dark green is all private office. The lighter green is our workspaces, or think cubicles or workstations. And as you move away from this more hierarchical and more living office-like logic, you add in places for people to meet, for telephone booths where folks can go have a private conversation and do heads-down work. You can add in workshops where groups of people, like the group I showed earlier, can get together and build models and make things that are right for what you do. And as we get to the far side over here, it becomes a much more fluid, open organization. So the real idea here at the end of the day is that living beats dying. And what we're talking about is not only making sure that people in organizations have a great life, live comfortably in the processes that they're in, but that their work results in the company doing extremely well. We are very interested in ways to enable purpose, express character, and enhance the activity that people are doing. So with that, I hope you understand a little bit more about Living Office, and we look forward to helping you develop the passion of the people in your organizations. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. We have time for 5 minutes of questions, so if you've got a burning question, please feel free to come up. We've got microphones that can come to you. And whilst you're noodling that, Chris, I'm wondering, could you put up the slide that has it on the modes?
Modes of work. Actually, how do I go back? Can you go backwards for me? Actually, it's not.
Well, one of the questions that I have is in thinking about these modes, and we do have a hangout coming up, is that I wondered if perhaps, Chris, from your perspective at Herman Miller, how can organizations best identify the modes that are most prevalent or missing?
Thank you. It's a great question. The logic of development of modes of work is really an exercise to be handled with your organizational development folks. With us, we have a process that allows it. It's not about the design of the space at the beginning. It's about identifying what people are actually doing in their day and what the kind of work that individuals do, and therefore how to build an organizational logic around what a space might be to support the work of those people. So we have a bunch of tools. It's kind of an interesting interactive process where we ask you to think about, okay, this department, this is the finance department. What do they do? Well, they do a huge amount of heads down facing computer work. So we're going to put a card there for those 20 people that are doing that. The design team, the design team's all over the place. They need to have places where they can cut things up and work together, and they need a workshop. So by doing that, we're able to kind of delineate across the board what spaces ought to do for people. What we're trying in this process to do is not make cookie cutter offices. I need this floor to hold, 500 people. That's not what this is about. It'll still have 500 people, but it'll be spaces that make those 500 people work better, work faster, be more productive in the process. So happy to help. Any of the Herman Miller people who are here today can help you with that if there are more questions about it.
And I would imagine, too, that observation and just seeing and walking around and really paying close attention, because I think sometimes if you are stuck in that cubicle, it's hard to really respond to some of these different types, or you have to force your way into it. It's
Right.
not as intuitive.
Well, I think the hardest part of this is getting people to think outside their own cubicle or office. And the logic of making a space where everybody has the kind of space they need is an interesting place. I showed you the Herman Miller headquarters offices. All of the executive leadership team sit in one of our new furniture systems that are without walls. And they have an area where it's a little more private than others, but their logic is, I need to be accessible to the people who work here, and there's an important team thing that happens between the executive leaders now that didn't happen when they were in individual offices, because they were hiding. Let's be honest, don't tell them I said that. But that's what happens in executive kind of places. They hide in the corner, and they're not actively engaged in what's going on. And actively engaging makes powerful organizations.
Absolutely. Any questions from the audience? Yes. Please give your name first, please.
My name is Tony Lipsy, and I have a question for Chris. And my goal isn't to make you feel uncomfortable.
But you may.
I happen to be one of those knuckle-dragging facilities guys that you referred to.
Oh, sorry, I didn't say knuckle dragging.
Oh, no,
I did not say
please,
knuckle dragging.
Please don't be apologetic, because we get at least one of you guys that refers to us that way each year that we have this conference. So my question to you is, since we're really not all that capable, when we're called on by the Herman Miller sales force, who should we be referring them to in our organization, since we can't make the decision?
No, I would never say that you can't make the decision.
Well, you said the best thing we should do is get out of the way. And
well,
I can tell you
in
that
a particular
I am not
organization, in a particular organization where it was complicated.
I'm going to
you're
say
right.
one thing, and I say this also to the Worktech people that organize this. This isn't the first time we've heard this kind of story, okay? We hear this every year. I'm not just a workplace and real estate professional. I have other credentials. I happen to be a CPA, and I go to many CPA conferences throughout the year. And when they're talking about a finance problem, somebody doesn't get up in front of the group and say, well, the first thing we do is we get all the accountants out of the room, and then we figure it out. I mean, come on. This is what we're all about. Let's take some pride, folks, in what we do, and can we have at least the people who are speaking to us be a little more responsive and respectful to the skills that we bring to the place.
Yes. And I think that it was not in... One more minute. Yes. I don't think that that was intended, because I think this is really an environment for us all to learn. And I think that, Worktech does have the opportunity to really kind of push us a little bit on that edge. But Chris, any comments?
Well, no, I want to apologize. I certainly did not mean to insult your profession or the folks that do what you do. I had a particular situation at the time that was complicated and needed to be changed. So what I do believe is that facilities people have a big very global role in this process. But we've got to all get the logic of how to make the workforce of the future comfortable in the places they work.
Okay.